Hello, it's Tuesday the 31st of March. This is Julia. Hello. You probably know that by now. I noticed when I was just going through the videos yesterday to check that they were all still working okay, that in almost all of them I said, hello, and then said something else, and then said, again, just like it was pointed out to me about a week ago. Stop saying, It's amazingly hard not to say, especially if you're not, very used to doing this, which I'm not particularly, although I'm getting a bit more used to it now. Anyway, so Tuesday, yes, week 2 of homeschool. See, just did it again. It's going a little bit better today in my house than yesterday. My son had his cast removed from his hand after he put a machete into it. And it turns out that it's sewn up very well. The stitches are really good and they've left it open now so he can actually use his hand a bit more, although he still can't go on the trampoline, so he's still a bit miffed about that. There, I did it again. See, now I've noticed I might stop saying My smallest son, who was 6 at the weekend, got given 2 Lego sets for his birthday, and they're the kind that you can make and then remake into something different. So he's remaking those. Did it again. Oh God, this is terrible. So don't say He's making and remaking his Lego sets. He's happy, and middle son is doing something hugely productive in some other room, I'm sure. So here we are. I was wondering, I'm back in the kitchen today, and I was wondering whether having the windows behind me makes me look like I've got a halo. I can see somebody I know is watching this. Tandy, what do you think? Do I look like I have a halo? She'll have to put a comment in the comments and then I'll know. I'm wondering if it is a bit bright behind me. Anyway, so we are on chapter 10. I still haven't found a bookmark, but there we are. Oh yeah, so Joe's had his first lesson with Epistolio and Petrus. Oh, thanks. My friend who was watching and who's been completely freaked out by that says I'm like a radiant angel. Excellent. Always good to be a radiant angel. So Joe is still... Oh, that's right. He has had this lesson with Epistolio. It hasn't gone well. He's been given dictation to do. He's supposed to be... hang on a minute, let's shift that a little bit. He's been supposed to be writing stuff down on the wax tablet with the stylus, and he's found that it's really, really difficult. So that didn't go well. All right, let's pick up from there then. Chapter 10. By the end of the day, Joe was sore and weary. He had managed to copy Petrus's dictation well enough, but it had taken him so long that Epistolio was convinced that he knew nothing, and decided that he had decided he would start teaching Joe from scratch. Joe knew it would be better like that, but his teacher's eagle eyes didn't miss a thing. He would have to work very hard if he was going to avoid the cane that stood ready in the corner. The other teacher, Heraclio, was exactly the opposite. For Joe's first ever riding lesson, he lifted him up onto the back of the horse, handed him the reins, and gave the animal a slap on its backside so that it trotted off across the paddock. There was no saddle and no stirrups, so Joe clung on with his legs. Unfortunately, the horse seemed to think this was a command and scampered around the field faster and faster until Joe fell off. Heraclio scooped him up off the ground, put him back on, slapped the horse again, and away they went. A second time. Again, Joe fell off. After the 4th time, he was bruised and resentful. "Don't worry," called Heraclio happily. "You'll soon learn. Why don't you sit on the fence and watch Petrus?" The following day, however, they began with swimming in the sea. This, at least, was something Joe could do, better than Petrus, as it turned out. "Not completely useless, then," Heraclio declared. "Is that supposed to be praise?" Joe muttered under his breath. Lucy's brother grinned. "Make the most of it." In the afternoon it was back to the classroom. This time Epistolio set Petrus some sums to do while he watched Joe write on his tablet. Joe bent over the rows of letters, scratching each one again and again in the wax. Epistolio corrected him now and then, but seemed satisfied with Joe's work. Every time he suspected Joe's attention was wandering, though, he rapped him over the knuckles with a ruler. By the time they finished in the middle of the afternoon, Joe's hand was red. On the third day, the physical training was swordsmanship. Joe was half afraid Heraclio would expect him and Petrus to begin fighting with real swords straight away. But fortunately Petrus hadn't done it before either, so the slave gave them both blunt sticks and began with footwork. "I feel like I've hardly seen you," Lucy said that afternoon, while they were playing noughts and crosses in one of the courtyards. "I know." Joe stifled a yawn. "I never imagined this when I thought about being here. I suppose if you stay somewhere longer, you get something a bit more like real life." He chalked his final cross. "I win." "Not again!" Lucy cried in frustration. "You've won every single game. How do you do that?" Joe tapped his nose and grinned. 2,000 years extra practice." "Rubbish!" Lucy brought out a small bag. "Let's play knucklebones." "That doesn't sound very nice." She rolled her eyes at him. "It's called that because you play it with sheep's knuckle bones." She emptied some small white bones onto the ground. "There are lots of different ways of playing this." She began to show him. "I know that game," Joe said. "We call it jacks, or 5 stones." He threw the knuckle bones up in the air and caught 2 of them on the back of his hand. "Ouch! It hurts less with my plastic set." "Don't be soft." "I'm not," he protested. "But you know, everything about the way you live is less comfortable than in my world." "Maybe you need to toughen up," she retorted. Joe harumphed. "Maybe you need to improve some of your inventions. I mean, this wax tablet and stylus thing, it's such hard work." Lucy narrowed her eyes. "You could always go out into the countryside and stay in one of the roundhouses," she said. "1 room for everyone, a dirt floor, no windows and no way of getting clean. You'd know what hard work is then. You fetch your own water, chop your own wood, light your own fire, kill and cook your own food, and bury your own rubbish." All right, Joe held up his hand. "I get the point." "Do you?" She fixed him with a look. "I think you'd find this pretty comfortable after that." "Yes, all right, you're probably right." He folded his arms. "Anyway, how do you know what it's like out there? You've never lived like that." "We stopped off when we travelled down from Verulamium. My father wanted us to see what Rome has given to the people of Britannia." "But if they're still living in roundhouses, it hasn't given them anything," Joe said. "Only in the countryside. In the towns it's more like here. Proper houses, running water, baths, all that sort of thing." She sounded so smug, Joe thought, as though it had anything to do with her. He yawned. "You're not tired, are you?" she said. "Yes, I am, and I can't wait for the weekend." "The weekend?" "Well, we've had 3 days of lessons, so I assume it must be Saturday soon. I need a break." Lucy was surprised. "But today is Sunday," she said. "We have lessons every day, unless we have time off for some reason." She laughed at the look on Joe's face. "You don't have weekends." Joe groaned. "I don't know if I can keep this up." "Come on, it's not that bad. Anyway, tomorrow is the start of a 3-day holiday." Joe sat up again. "Thank heavens for that. Why?" "There's going to be a feast the day after tomorrow. Lots and lots of people are coming, so there are all the preparations to make." "Oh, yes." He frowned vaguely. "Your mother said something about that. Do we have to help? Is that why we don't have lessons?" "No, but the slaves who teach us are needed for other duties." Joe yawned again. "You need to get an early night tonight," Lucy said. "Then we can do something together in the morning." By the time they'd finished supper, however, it didn't feel all that early. Joe trudged off to his room. He felt exhausted. How did Petrus manage? Perhaps it was something you got used to. Partway through this thought, he fell asleep. He was woken the next morning by Arethusa shaking him. "Goodness me, Master Valentinian, you are a heavy sleeper." "Isn't it a holiday today?" Joe said blearily. "For you, perhaps." "Can't I have a lie-in then?" "You mean stay in bed to sleep?" "Oh no, Master Valentinian, that wouldn't do at all." She bustled out. Joe sat up. He ached all over. There was a knock on the door. "Come in." Lucy stood in the doorway. "Aren't you going to get up?" Joe threw himself back on his bed. "I don't want to." She shook her head. "You can't just give up." "You don't know what it's like," he protested. "You don't have to do any of the things we're doing with Heraclio." "No." Lucy looked wistful. "It's all right for you. Bits of me hurt that I never knew existed. You have it easy." "Do I?" Joe sat up and pulled his nightshirt off over his head. When he looked at Lucy again, she was fiddling with the bulla at the neck of her dress. "You know, sometimes I'd like to do those things," she said. "Ride, swim, use a sword." "Why don't you then?" She frowned. "Girls don't." "But you're rich. Why can't you just tell your parents you want to do it? There are so many slaves, there must be someone who could teach you if Heraclio doesn't have time. Or you could join me and Petrus." He pulled his shirt on. Lucy pushed the bulla back down inside her dress. "It's not like that." Her voice was choked. "You don't get it, do you? Girls do weaving, boys do fighting. That's how it is." She turned on her heel. "I'm going for breakfast," she said over her shoulder. "See you there." Joe thought about what she'd said while he finished getting dressed. At home, if you wanted to learn horse riding or swimming, it was down to whether your parents had enough money. He'd never thought about what it might be like to have your choices limited by whether you were a boy or a girl. In the dining room, Lucy was sitting with her sisters on one of the couches. She didn't look up as he came in. Joe wondered if he needed to say sorry, but he wasn't quite sure what for. Sorry that things are different here from back at home, or perhaps sorry I didn't understand. Neither of those really made sense. He helped himself to fruit and sat down on the couch opposite. The girls talked quietly among themselves for a couple of minutes. Joe wondered if Lucy was deliberately keeping her voice down so that he couldn't hear what she was saying. Then Sallustia stood up. "See you in there," she said to Lucy and Antonia. Then to Joe as an afterthought, "See you later, Valentinian." "See you in where?" he asked, after she'd gone. "The baths," Lucy said. "It's part of getting ready for tomorrow." "I can't come with you, can I?" Antonia giggled, but Lucy was stern. "Of course not. You go after the midday meal." "I thought we were going to do something together this morning." Joe knew he sounded like a little child. Lucy shrugged. "I'd forgotten about the baths. There should still be time, maybe after I come out, or after you've finished this afternoon. Come on, Antonia, let's go." Joe finished his breakfast alone. He felt fed up. He'd been looking forward to spending the day with Lucy, but first he'd managed to upset her, and now she was busy for the morning, and he would be at the baths for the afternoon. He left the dining room and wandered out into the colonnades to see what was going on. There were usually quite a number of different tasks being done when he walked to his classes with Petrus. But today there were fewer slaves sitting at their carving or mending, and far more hurrying to and fro. Women trotted past with vast baskets of linen and trays of plates, bowls and jugs. In the formal gardens, 4 men rather than 1 were clipping the hedges, and a further 4 were scrubbing the statues and fountains to remove any trace of green. Along the north colonnade there were huge piles of foliage and flowers being made into enormous garlands. A ship must have come in the previous day as well, because there was a steady stream of men carrying crates from the direction of the shore over towards the north side of the compound. While Joe watched, a group of 10 men staggered past, carrying a very large crate covered with a cloth. They were heading towards the hall at the eastern end of the north wing. Joe's attention was caught by a strange noise that came from the crate from time to time, somewhere between a yowl and a snarl. Each time it happened, the crate lurched one way or the other, and the men lurched with it, struggling to hold it steady. He was so absorbed in wondering what might be beneath the cloth that he didn't see Tiberius until it was too late. "Watching people at work again?" Tiberius sneered. "That's a favourite pastime of yours, isn't it?" Joe said nothing. "Maybe you should try working a bit yourself. I hear you're not doing too well at your lessons." Joe shot him a look. "It's hardly a secret, is it?" Tiberius swaggered. "Master Valentinian seems not to have had any schooling, they say. He doesn't know how to handle a sword or ride a horse, even though he's the son of a general. And they're surprised." He smiled, but there was no pleasure in his face. Joe turned more calmly than he felt and walked away. But Tiberius fell into step beside him as though they were having a friendly chat. "Tell me, do you agree that they would be even more surprised to know that you're not the son of a general?" Joe could feel his heart beating fast. If Tiberius had been afraid of him before, he wasn't now. "Who am I, then?" He tried to sound brave. As long as they were surrounded by people, Tiberius probably wouldn't hurt him. Joe wondered what to do when they came to the end of the east colonnade. There was such a stream of people scurrying in and out of the hall at the north-east corner that he would have to stop. "I'm not sure it matters who you are," Tiberius said. "What I do know is that someone has helped you to pass yourself off as somebody you're not." He caught hold of Joe's wrist. His grip was strong. "The question is, who? There's Lucilia, of course. You're Lucy." In a sudden flick, he twisted Joe's arm behind his back. Pain shot up through Joe's shoulder. He gasped. "I could see if she'd like to tell me anything," Tiberius hissed in his ear. "No!" The word flew out of Joe's mouth. He pressed his lips together. "She doesn't know who I am. It's nothing to do with her." "I don't agree," said Tiberius pleasantly, not letting go. "Whatever lies you've told to Helena Calvina, you've had help from little Lucy. The story, for one thing, that's hers, isn't it? But it isn't just her, is it?" He twisted Joe's arm harder. Joe cried out. 2 slaves nearby glanced up, then instantly looked away again. Tiberius held Joe's wrist a few seconds longer, then dropped it. His arm fell back to his side. The blood coursed into it again. But before he could feel relief, the older boy grabbed a handful of his hair. "There's this too, isn't there?" he jeered. "You were blonde last time you were here." Joe's eyes watered. He felt as though his hair was being yanked out. He stumbled towards Tiberius. The world around him blurred. He heard a whispering in his ears. "No!" he shouted. "Not yet!" He clenched his teeth. He would not leave Lucy yet. Not yet what? Tiberius let go of his hair. Joe reeled away, dizzy. I'm not ready, he muttered to himself through his teeth. Tiberius sprang away. Ready? For what? Joe looked up. The world snapped into sharp focus. There was alarm in Tiberius's face. Joe narrowed his eyes. For some reason, this boy, who was older and bigger than Joe, was suddenly afraid of him. Joe knew he had to seize his chance. He advanced on Tiberius. What do you think I am? He said in a low voice. Have you any idea what I can do? Tiberius backed away. You don't know, do you? You think I really can't ride a horse? You think I really can't use a sword? You believe that? Tiberius was pale. I don't know what to believe, he stammered, still edging away. If people only knew what I can do. Joe fixed his eyes on Tiberius's face. Perhaps I should show them. Perhaps I should start with you, since you're the one causing me all the trouble. He kept walking slowly towards Tiberius. The other boy glanced over his shoulder. Rage made Joe feel invincible, but he knew that he couldn't carry out his own threat. He had to scare Tiberius away. The older boy looked over his shoulder again. Leave me alone, he hissed. Joe glared at Tiberius. Then you leave me alone, he said savagely. For a moment, Tiberius's mouth contorted strangely. Then he spat at the ground directly in front of Joe, a huge, bubbling pool of saliva. On instinct, Joe stepped forward and smeared it deliberately across the ground beneath his foot. Tiberius stared, then whirled around and disappeared away down the colonnade. Joe sat down on the wall between two pillars and waited for his heart to stop pounding. All around him, the slaves carried on with their tasks. Joe watched them as they passed. Not one of them looked at him. He might as well have been invisible. He shivered. He'd thought he was safe as long as he was in a busy place. But Tiberius could have beaten him bloody in front of all these people, and not one of them would have done anything to stop it. He rubbed his hands up and down his arms to warm them. When he was first here, that would have outraged him. But he was starting to understand the way things worked. It would be much too risky for a slave to admit even seeing anything. Tiberius wouldn't hesitate to have them punished. For the first time, Joe felt worried for Arethusa and the scribe Septimus. In helping him, they had put themselves in great danger. He shuddered and got to his feet. So far in Lucy's world, he hadn't encountered the grisliness and bloodshed that was in every book he'd read about the Romans. But all at once he had a strong feeling that if he only scratched the surface of life here, the violence would be there instantly, like the blood that fills a cut. So that's the end of chapter 10. I don't know what you think of Tiberius. He's quite nasty, I think. And I think Joe doesn't really know how to deal with it, but he does seem to have some kind of hold over Tiberius, he's discovered. So, yeah, I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. We've got another 6 chapters, so that'll take us to the end of the end of this week and a couple of days into next week. I figure we may as well finish off rather than stop for the Easter holidays, since Easter is not going to mean a lot to most of us, given that we can't go anywhere and do anything we're not already doing. So I'll certainly finish this next week. But yeah, same time tomorrow, 2 o'clock for chapter 11.